In 2023, while the world was focused on Ukraine, Russia and China were busy signing deals that could reshape the balance of power in the Pacific. A massive intelligence leak has exposed something that should terrify anyone paying attention to the Indo-Pacific. Russia is directly selling weapons to China and helping it prepare for what looks to be an inevitable invasion of Taiwan. According to leaked documents, obtained by researchers from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, one of the UK's foremost think tanks for the defence industry, Moscow agreed to sell Beijing a complete package for airborne invasion operations. It's a package that's almost exclusively designed to seize Taiwan. The shopping list includes 37 BMD-4M light amphibious assault vehicles, 11 Sprut SDM1 light amphibious anti-tank self-propelled guns, and 11 BTR-MDM Rakushka airborne armoured personal carriers. But it's not just hardware. Russia has also agreed to train an entire Chinese airborne battalion in how to use this equipment. And perhaps most concerning, Moscow agreed to transfer the technology so China can produce these weapons domestically. They're essentially trying to hand Taiwan to China on a silver platter. The equipment will reportedly be customized with Chinese communication systems and software that allows them to fire Chinese-made ammunition. This isn't just a simple arms sale, like what we'd seen between the US and its NATO or Indo-Pacific allies, such as Japan or South Korea. These weapons are something that China didn't really have before, and fully integrating them into its existing military structure is one of the most significant moves aimed at bringing Russia and China closer to the touted Alliance Without Limits image from a few years ago. And these three weapons can be vital for Chinese goals precisely because of Taiwan's geography. You see, the core of the island is dominated by a mountain range that accounts for roughly 60% of its land area. This topographically splits the island into pieces, where a successful invasion depends on an amphibious approach from multiple sides, since ground troops wouldn't be able to advance in mountainous and urbanized terrain with heavy resistance. And yet, even the amphibious approach presents significant issues. Taiwan's own National Defense Institute suggested there are only 20 beaches in northern and western Taiwan that would be conducive to an invasion. Conversely, Taiwan announced way back in 2023 that it intends to increase the budget of its annual drills to simulate a potential Chinese invasion on these beaches, supported by a large aerial strike. Thus, the military drill conducted for 2025 was the largest one since its inception in 1984, mobilizing 22,000 reservists, educating the local population on air raid procedures, and lasting for 10 days. With practically 40 years of preparation and a bilateral defense agreement with the US, Taiwan has slowly but surely fortified most of the potential entry points that China would target in an invasion using its existing capabilities. But that's where Russia's expertise comes in. The plan outlined in the documents is audacious. Special forces would use the parachute system called Dalnolyot, or Dalnolet, meaning far flyer, to drop from civilian cargo aircraft at altitudes up to 32,000 feet and glide undetected into Taiwanese territory using specialized parachute systems. Dalnolet's range is estimated to be over 50 miles, which could allow it to evade traditional detection systems and point-blank defenses. Some soldiers wouldn't even need to parachute in. They could enter Taiwan legally as tourists beforehand, blending into the population. Then comes the heavy equipment using the same Dalnolet. With this, China could establish a heavily armed battalion on the ground without a single ship crossing the Taiwan Strait. The primary target will likely be the Taipei port. Controlling it gives China the staging ground for a full seaborne invasion by the People's Liberation Army. But let's discuss what the three weapon systems can actually do. And for reference, we'll use the very recent, very bloody testing ground, the war in Ukraine. The BMD-4M infantry fighting vehicle is Russia's premier airborne assault platform, and it's seen some use in Ukraine since the invasion began in 2022. This amphibious beast can swim across rivers and lakes while providing fire support with its 100mm main gun and 30mm auto cannon. In Ukraine, BMD-4Ms have been used in combined arms operations, supporting infantry advances and providing mobile firepower in fluid battlefield conditions. One of the key benefits of an infantry fighting vehicle over a main battle tank is its inherent mobility. Being much lighter allows the vehicle to pick up speed faster and move between strategic points quicker, capturing enemy positions and not allowing the enemy to regroup in time. In 2023, one BMD was partially responsible for destroying a Ukrainian position with supportive drone fire, while serving as mid-range support itself. This suggests the vehicle can achieve solid penetration capacities when paired with adequate air support, something that China will likely have in a potential invasion of Taiwan. The most important part here is how the vehicle's design conforms to China's hypothetical plans. Unlike most vehicles, it can be airdropped with its crew inside. Within minutes of landing, you'd have a fully operational fighting vehicle ready for combat. In a Taiwan scenario, imagine dozens of these dropping onto golf courses, farmland, or open spaces near Taipei. Within an hour, China could have armored units operating deep inside Taiwan before a single ship reaches the shore. The vehicle's amphibious capability is also relevant for Taiwan. The island's rivers, wetlands, and coastal areas would normally slow down or channel an invasion force. The BMD-4M could swim through at about 6 miles per hour and cross most obstacles that would stop conventional armor. However, as far as its actual potential is concerned, the lack of armor is potentially a liability. Due to its amphibious design, the vehicle can't sustain direct hits with large caliber fire, which would make it more susceptible to a counterattack. Additionally, there are limited reports of the vehicle being fitted with additional anti-drone protection, so it's unclear what design Russia would export. The open-source intelligence analysis website, Oryx, has reported that at least 170 of these vehicles have been lost in Ukraine, demonstrating their lack of anti-drone defenses and armor to be possible bottlenecks that China would have to go around. The 2S-25 Sprut SDM1 light tank is essentially a tank destroyer that can fly. With its 125mm main gun, which is the same caliber used on the T-90, this lightweight platform can knock out any armored Taiwan fields. In Ukraine, Sprut SDM1s haven't been seen as much simply because they're uniquely designed to support paradropping and behind enemy lines operations, something that Russia hasn't managed to achieve due to a lack of air supremacy. Notably, this explains why Russia has only built a few dozens of these vehicles, as existing battlefield conditions didn't demand it. Plus, the only production facility that could build them is busy trying to produce enough IFVs for its own war, rather than supply China. Additionally, the SDM1 variation adds fire control systems and remote detonation ammunition. This allows the gunner to detonate the projectile's explosive mid-air, which ejects shrapnel in all directions. Against vehicles and tanks, this might not be as useful, but if you lob a projectile over a trench or infantry defense position, the explosion and shrapnel can cause massive area casualties. The upgrade comes with yet another downside, as it requires parts that Russia can't spare, as they're used for T-90s as well. Admittedly, it's possible China would export some of its own tech or adapt the system with its solutions to support Russia's manufacturing. But in an invasion of Taiwan, China could use this weapon to solve one of its critical problems. Taiwan's military has invested heavily in defensive fortifications and hardened positions. The Sprut SDM1's high-velocity armor-piercing rounds can penetrate bunkers and destroy Taiwan's M1A2 Abrams tanks or indigenous Brave Tiger tanks. And because it's air-droppable, China could position these weapons behind Taiwanese defenses before anyone realizes what's happening. The BTR-MDM Rakushka is an armored personnel carrier designed to get troops from the air to the objective quickly and safely. It can carry 13 fully equipped soldiers plus a crew of 2, and unlike most APCs, it can be airdropped with troops inside, like the BMD-4M infantry fighting vehicle. In Ukraine, similar vehicles have been used for rapid assault operations, inserting small teams behind enemy lines to seize key positions. For Taiwan, imagine this scenario. While Taiwan's military focuses on defending beaches and ports, dozens of BTR-MDMs land in the island's interior. They disgorge special forces teams trained by Russia specifically for this mission. Within hours, these units could seize airports, power plants, communications hubs, and government buildings. Taiwan's defenders would be fighting on 2 fronts before the amphibious assault even begins. The battle might be over even before it starts. Russia has demonstrated this strategy in Ukraine, using airborne forces to attempt the siege of Hostomel airport near Kyiv in the war's opening days. While that particular operation failed due to Ukrainian resistance and lack of reinforcement, the concept is sound, and China could have learned from Russia's mistakes. The Orlan-10 reconnaissance drone rounds out the package. This small, relatively cheap UAV has become one of Russia's most effective weapons in Ukraine. Used for artillery spotting, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare, Orlan-10s provide real-time battlefield intelligence that allows Russian forces to coordinate attacks with precision. The key to the Orlan lies in its highly modular design. The drones can carry specific thermal imaging or daylight cameras for more nuanced capabilities, specifically against mechanized infantry. But the drone can also carry specialized electronic warfare equipment, allowing it to jam enemy communications and drone operations high above their detection radius. In Taiwan, these drones could be invaluable. They can fly for hours, mapping defensive positions, tracking troop movements, and providing targeting data for Chinese missiles and artillery. Taiwan's relatively small size, at just 13,976 square miles, means a swarm of Orlan-10s could provide near-complete surveillance coverage of the entire island. Put all of them all together, and you can see a clear pattern forming. Each of the weapons that Russia is supplying is meant to achieve a singular goal: allow China to pressure Taiwan's fortifications from within without resorting to a full-on coastal invasion. Airdropping vehicles in open fields such as farmland or even sports fields, PLA's troops could then close in on Taiwan's limited military infrastructure in ports or airfields from the opposite side. This can help them avoid most of the coastal-bound defensive systems that Taiwan has been developing or purchasing for the past years. When combined with PLA's numerically superior army and more equipment production, it could have a decisive advantage within Taiwan's own territory, seizing control of the country from within. Alternatively, the ability to airdrop vital military gear and support from 50 miles off of Taiwan's coast would give invading naval assets more options to catch defenses off guard and splintered, softening them before the actual invasion fully sets in. But these weapons are no good without skilled people to operate them, which is why China and Russia have been conducting an increasing number of military exercises that look suspiciously like rehearsals for a Taiwan scenario. In 2024 alone, Chinese forces conducted over 3,000 incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. That's an average of over 8 per day. These operations constantly probe Taiwan's defenses, test response times, and normalize Chinese military presence around the island. China has also been conducting joint exercises with Russia at an unprecedented pace. In July 2024, joint air patrols saw Chinese and Russian bombers flying together near Alaska. In September 2024, Chinese and Russian warships conducted joint patrols throughout the northern Pacific. On the Taiwan front, China has also demonstrated vital naval and amphibious invasion capabilities. The inauguration of Taiwan's President William Lai was almost immediately met with a joint Sword 2024A exercise, including 53 ships and over 80 aircraft. And in February 2025, China conducted one of its largest ever amphibious landing exercise, displaying its dock landing, assault, and comprehensive supply ships, as well as assets such as main battle tanks, amphibious vehicles, and infantry support vehicles storming a beach. While China claimed these were routine training, the timing suggests something more deliberate. Russia has participated directly in some of these exercises, sharing lessons learned from Ukraine and providing tactical advice on combined arms operations. According to RUSI's analysis, Russian advisors have been present at multiple PLA training facilities, specifically focusing on airborne operations and urban warfare, exactly the skills needed for a Taiwan invasion. By contrast, Russia has been practically forced into urban warfare scenarios as the frontline in Donetsk has stalled significantly around larger cities like Pokrovsk. While Russia is ostensibly losing momentum there, it's unfair to suggest it's learning nothing from that experience. China has also increased its grey zone tactics. Since 2023, 4 undersea cables connecting Taiwan to the outside world have been mysteriously severed. While China denied involvement, the timing and location of these incidents suggested deliberate sabotage designed to test Taiwan's vulnerability and international response. China Coast Guard vessels also routinely operate inside Taiwan's territorial waters, conducting what Beijing calls law enforcement operations. These incursions are coordinated with PLA Navy ships just outside the territorial limit, creating a constant military presence that normalizes Chinese control over Taiwan's waters. But here's where things get interesting, and where Russia's involvement becomes even more suspicious. While China is preparing for war, its economy is showing serious cracks, and those cracks suggest that China might not be able to afford the very war it's planning. Let's start with the most critical vulnerability, the Malacca Strait. Right now, nearly two-thirds of China's maritime trade flows through this single choke point between Malaysia and Indonesia, the Strait of Malacca. That includes roughly 80% of China's oil imports in total. If China invades Taiwan, the United States and its allies will almost certainly blockade the strait within hours. If that happens, China's economy implodes. China's trade value in 2024 was 37% of its GDP, which could vanish overnight. China would be forced to rely on overland routes from Russia for oil, gas, and other critical resources. But Russia already accounts for 20% of China's oil imports after multiple reinforcement deals following the Ukraine invasion. That means China would then need to increase Russian imports. China's vaunted Belt and Road Initiative was supposed to solve this problem by creating overland trade routes to Europe and the Middle East. But the initiative has been an expensive disaster. The Pakistani Gwadar port, meant to bypass the Malacca Strait entirely by connecting China directly to the Indian Ocean, still lacks basic cargo processing facilities after billions in investment, and is unlikely to be ready before the suggested 2026 invasion. Which brings us to why Russia is selling these weapons to China. On the surface, it looks like a strategic partnership. Russia gets much needed revenue from arms sales, while its defense industry is under severe strain from the Ukraine war. China gets combat-tested equipment and training from one of the world's most experienced airborne forces. But look deeper, and Russia's motivations become more desperate. According to RUSI's Danny Liuk, Russia doesn't just want China to invade Taiwan. Russia wants China to drag in the United States, Japan, and possibly other allies into a longer conflict, essentially creating a new global war that diverts Western attention and resources away from Ukraine. Think about it. Russia's economy is being crushed by sanctions. Its military has suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties in Ukraine. Its weapon stockpiles are depleted, forcing Moscow to beg for artillery shells from North Korea and drones from Iran. Russia needs NATO to fight on multiple fronts to relieve pressure on its own forces. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan would do exactly that. The US, and by extension NATO, would be forced to choose between defending Taiwan and supporting Ukraine. But here's another problem with Russia's plan. It might not have the equipment to actually deliver on these contracts. Russia has been forced to reactivate T-55 tanks from the 1950s, pull artillery pieces from museums, and convert civilian vehicles into improvised fighting vehicles to sustain its war in Ukraine. The country that once had the world's second largest military has been reduced to relying on Iran and North Korea for basic weapons supplies. The BMD-4M and BTR-MDM that Russia is supposedly selling to China are the exact vehicles Russia needs to sustain operations in Ukraine. These are modern, capable systems that Russia's airborne forces rely on. Every vehicle sold to China is one less vehicle available for Russia's own military. And Russia's defense industry, while operating at maximum capacity, is struggling to replace even basic equipment losses. Artillery barrels are wearing out faster than they can be replaced. Precision-guided munitions are in short supply. Tank and vehicle production lines are running 24/7, but still can't keep up with battlefield losses. So, how is Russia supposed to deliver 60 armoured vehicles, training programs and technology transfers to China while its own forces are desperate for equipment? The answer is, it probably can't. At least not without severely compromising its own military capabilities. Which makes the deal even more suspect. Either Russia is so desperate for Chinese money and political support that it's willing to hollow out its own forces, or the deal is more about signalling cooperation than actual delivery. There's also another possibility. The equipment that reaches China might be older variants or less capable versions than advertised. Russia has a long history of selling export models that lack the capabilities of domestic variants. Given Russia's desperate situation, it's entirely possible that these new BMD-4Ms are actually refurbished older vehicles that would otherwise sit in storage. And this brings us to the most important comparison. If Russia can't conquer Ukraine, what makes anyone think China can conquer Taiwan? Well, let's look at the numbers. Ukraine's defense budget in 2021, before the Russian invasion, was approximately $4.2 billion. Taiwan's defense budget for 2024 is $19.1 billion, more than 3 times larger. Ukraine had a military of about 200,000 active personnel pre-invasion. Taiwan has 165,000 active personnel, plus 1.66 million trained reservists. But the differences go deeper. Ukraine, like Taiwan, had no formal defense treaty with the United States or NATO. Military aid flowed slowly in the war's early months, with Western nations hesitant to escalate the conflict. Ukraine had to defend itself largely with Soviet-era equipment, supplemented by whatever weapons the West would provide. Taiwan, on the other hand, has been preparing for a Chinese invasion practically since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949. The island is bristling with advanced American weapons, F-16V fighters, AH-64 Apache helicopters, M1A2 Abrams tanks, and indigenous weapon systems designed specifically to counter a Chinese invasion. Taiwan operates Patriot missile batteries, has a growing fleet of advanced submarines, and has invested billions in anti-ship missiles designed to destroy invasion fleets. More importantly, Taiwan is something Ukraine didn't: geography. Ukraine is a massive country with thousands of miles of border that Russia could attack from multiple directions. Taiwan is an island. Every Chinese soldier, every vehicle, every bullet has to cross 100 miles of open water to reach Taiwan, which would be a natural kill zone that heavily favors the defender. And unlike Ukraine's initial weeks, where Russian forces nearly reached Kyiv, Taiwan would have days or even weeks of warning before any invasion. China can't really hide the assembly of the massive amphibious fleet needed to invade Taiwan. Satellites would spot the build-up immediately, giving Taiwan time to mobilize, disperse forces, and prepare defenses. Russia's performance in Ukraine has also been a devastating advertisement for the weaknesses of Russian military equipment and doctrine. The BMD-4Ms and other vehicles that Russia is selling to China have proved vulnerable to modern anti-tank weapons. Ukrainian forces have destroyed hundreds of Russian armoured vehicles using Javelin missiles, NLAWs, and even cheaper systems like RPG-7s with modern warheads. Which brings us to perhaps the most important factor: China's military technology is untested in real combat. China has been showcasing impressive weapon systems for years. It's developed stealth fighters like the J-20, aircraft carriers like the Shandong and Fujian, hypersonic missiles, railguns, and even laser weapons. On paper, the People's Liberation Army looks formidable. But paper performance doesn't translate to battlefield effectiveness. China hasn't fought a major war since 1979, when it invaded Vietnam in what Beijing called teaching Vietnam a lesson. That war was a disaster for China, with the PLA suffering heavy casualties against a much smaller Vietnamese force before withdrawing after less than a month. So, every Chinese weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every command structure is theoretical. Yes, the PLA conducts extensive training and exercises. But training against yourself is fundamentally different from fighting an actual enemy who's trying to kill you and fight for dear life like Taiwan would in an invasion scenario. Compare this to NATO's military, which has been in near constant combat operations for decades. American forces have real-world experience in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and dozens of smaller operations. NATO has been learning from Ukraine's victories over the past 3 years and implementing potential modifications to procurement systems to include drone operations and specific anti-Russia systems. China's need for Russian weapons suggests the PLA isn't as confident in its own capabilities as it projects. If China truly believed it could successfully invade Taiwan, why would it need Russian equipment and training? Chinese planners know their military is untested, their equipment is unproven, and their strategies are theoretical. This doesn't mean Taiwan is safe. China could still attempt an invasion out of desperation or miscalculation. Russia could push China toward confrontation as a distraction from its own failures. The grey zone pressure will continue, and the military exercises will intensify. And it will take just one small mistake or over-aggression to set a chain of events into motion. Thanks for watching. Now, if you want to learn more about how Taiwan plans to stand up against China's invasion attempts, check out this video. If you want to stay up to date with interesting facts about global geopolitics and military developments, subscribe to The Military Show for daily videos.